Okay, so I need to start tonight by just saying, 36 hours ago I was barely even paying attention to this thing. 36 hours ago there was a 10% chance this blob of clouds and rain over Mexico and Texas was ever going to amount to anything. I looked at it, I shrugged, I moved on, and then I woke up today. And now we're sitting here talking about Tropical Storm Arthur potentially forming within the next 2 to 3 days. That is a wild swing in a very short amount of time, and I think it deserves a really thorough conversation tonight, so that's exactly what we're going to do. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and if you've got something on your heart that you need prayed over, throw it in the comments. I read them, I mean that. Now let's get into it. So let's start at the very beginning and talk about what we're actually looking at right now, because I don't want anybody to run away with the idea that Arthur is already a storm. It is not. Right now what we have is something called Invest 90L. That's the official designation when the National Hurricane Center identifies an area of shower and thunderstorm activity as being worth watching for potential tropical development. It doesn't mean it is tropical, it just means it's under investigation. Think of it like a person of interest in a crime drama. They haven't been charged with anything yet, but we've got our eye on them. Right now this invest sits over northern Mexico and parts of Texas. If you look at the satellite imagery, you can see this massive blob of cloud cover and rain. And if you look really closely at the lower levels of the atmosphere, there is some spin starting to develop. A little rotation. Nothing dramatic, but it's there. What I actually want you to pay attention to, though, and this becomes really important later, is the way all that cloud activity is spreading outward at the top. The upper level structure of this system is already doing something interesting, and that's going to matter a lot when we talk about why this thing might actually be able to hold together and strengthen even after it moves inland. So tuck that thought in the back of your mind because we're coming back to it. Now let's talk about what the National Hurricane Center is actually saying, because these are the people with the authority to name storms and they've been watching this closely. I was looking at the latest tropical weather outlook, and they've got this invest carrying a 40% chance of development within the next 48 hours and a 50% chance of development overall. And to be clear, when I say development, I mean it organizes enough to become a tropical depression or a tropical storm with a defined center of circulation. The most likely area for that to happen, if it does happen, is out over the northwestern Gulf of Mexico, somewhere off the coast of Texas and maybe into western Louisiana. That's the zone where, if conditions cooperate, Arthur gets his name. Now let's dive into the model data, because this is where things get genuinely wild. I want to walk through both the European model, the Euro, and the American model, the GFS, because they're each telling their own version of the same story. Starting with the Euro, if you look at tomorrow morning, we're already waking up to a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity pushing across the deep south. There's actually an embedded area of energy I noticed sitting over Alabama and Georgia, sliding into South Carolina, so it's not just a Gulf Coast event, even at this early stage. Tuesday looks like we might catch a little bit of a breather across Texas and Louisiana, but don't get too comfortable, because Wednesday morning is where things get really interesting. Wednesday morning on the Euro, we're looking at a sub-1004 millibar low pressure system popping up right along the southern Texas coastline. That's a meaningful number. That tells you there is a real defined area of low pressure trying to organize. And a tropical cyclone is essentially just a well-organized, warm core low pressure system with a defining circulation. So if we're seeing that kind of pressure reading, we're in the ballpark. From there, the Euro takes this system and drags it inland. And here's where my jaw kind of drops a little bit. You've got deep colors in the model output over Birmingham. Oranges and reds indicating very heavy, very intense rainfall. Instead of this thing weakening and just fizzling out the way you'd normally expect a tropical system to once it's over land, the Euro actually shows it trying to maintain or even enhance itself as it pushes through Mississippi and Alabama, heading into Thursday night and Friday morning. And the central pressure is still reading around 1,008 millibars. That is an organized storm over the middle of the country. That almost never happens. And then by Friday, the remnants of whatever this is continue pushing toward the Carolinas, and some of the guidance even suggests it might try to emerge off the Atlantic coast and organize again. I know that sounds like science fiction, but the model is showing it. Take that with appropriate caution, but don't ignore it either. Now the GFS is a little more conservative, as it often is with these types of hybrid systems. Tomorrow morning on the GFS, same story. Widespread shower and thunderstorm activity across the deep south getting fueled by this tropical energy down in Texas and Mexico. Tuesday evening sees a bit of a lull, but then Wednesday, the GFS also shows energy trying to bubble up off the Texas coast, dropping towards sub-1010 millibars. Is that our tropical depression forming? Maybe. The GFS is a little less enthusiastic about calling it a full tropical storm, but it's still showing a meaningful area of low pressure with heavy tropical rainfall pushing inland Thursday and Friday. Flash flooding threat is real no matter how you slice it. I also looked at the Euro ensemble output tonight, which is a really useful way to account for uncertainty. Instead of one single model run, the ensemble is basically 51 different versions of the forecast all run at once. And when you look at those 51 members, you start seeing a bunch of L's. That's low pressure centers, clustered around the Texas coast on Wednesday. Some of them are sub 1,000 millibars, which is storm territory. They spread out as you move through the week, some members faster, some slower, but the consensus is still significant tropical moisture getting dragged across the Gulf states from Wednesday through the weekend. Let's talk about actual rainfall, because this is what's going to affect the most people regardless of whether Arthur officially gets named. The Euro operational run is absolutely dunking on parts of southeast Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. We're talking 8 to 9 inches of rainfall in some of these spots, with a solid corridor of 6 or more inches stretching across the Gulf Coast states. Houston is in this corridor, Lake Charles is in this corridor, areas further east start looking wetter and wetter as the week progresses, and the signal for the Carolinas has noticeably increased since even yesterday. Columbia, Charlotte, that part of the world is now being targeted for meaningful rainfall amounts in the 3 to 5 inch range or more. The Weather Prediction Center, actual human forecasters, the experts who synthesize all of this model data and draw the official guidance, they're going big on rainfall too. Some areas along the Texas coastline looking at potentially 10 inches of rain through the coming weekend. That is not a typo. 10 inches. Atlanta is getting mentioned in the conversation now, and Atlanta wasn't on the radar at all a day ago. All of that rainfall potential translates directly into flash flooding risk. And we've already got a moderate risk in effect. That's level 4 out of 5 on the flash flooding scale, covering parts of the region right now, heading through Tuesday morning. Tuesday, the risk expands. Wednesday, the 40% flash flooding probability zone moves closer to the Houston and Louisiana coastline area. Thursday, the risk balloon expands dramatically northward, reaching all the way into Pennsylvania and West Virginia. If you are anywhere in that broad corridor from the Gulf Coast up through the Mid-Atlantic, you need to be taking the flooding threat seriously this week, not just watching, preparing. Now I want to spend a few minutes really nerding out with you because I think understanding the why behind all of this makes it way more interesting. Let me talk about upper level divergence. Picture the atmosphere in layers, way up high, like 35,000 to 40,000 feet. There are winds that essentially act like a ventilation system for any storm below. When winds flow outward away from a storm, that creates divergence. It's like opening a drain in a bathtub. Suddenly everything rushes toward that drain and upward through it. For tropical systems in the open ocean, when this works really well, you get what are called upper-level anticyclones, essentially a massive outflow layer all the way around the storm that allows it to intensify rapidly. For tropical systems in the open ocean, when this works really well, you get what are called upper-level anticyclones, essentially a massive outflow layer all the way around. This system is not going to have that ideal setup. On the western backside, you've got flow working against it. That's where dry air intrudes, and that's why the system is kind of lopsided. The heavy rain and the strongest activity will be biased to the east and northeast of the center, not wrapping symmetrically all the way around. And you can actually already see this happening in real time. That broad shield of clouds being pushed out well to the east, that's that upper level outflow already at work. The engine is already running. I also just want to make sure I don't leave you hanging on the severe weather threat for Wednesday, because that's a whole other dimension of this event. There is an enhanced risk of severe weather, that's level 3 out of 5, in place for Wednesday. The area highlighted includes a hatched region. We're looking at the potential for strong tornadoes, wind gusts exceeding hurricane force, and hail bigger than 2 inches. And Thursday still carries a slight risk of severe weather for the Mid-Atlantic and portions of the Northeast and Central Appalachians. So the impacts of this system are going to be felt across a really widespread area, from the Texas coastline all the way up to the Mid-Atlantic. This is not a local Gulf Coast story. This is a multi-region, multi-day event with multiple hazards. So to wrap it all up, what do you need to take from tonight? First, Invest 90L has a 50% chance of becoming Tropical Storm Arthur over the next few days, most likely off the Texas and Louisiana coastline. Whether it becomes a named storm or not is honestly almost secondary to the impacts it's going to bring. Heavy flooding rainfall is coming to the Gulf Coast states starting Wednesday and extending through the weekend. Flash flooding is a major threat for a huge portion of the country. Severe weather, including tornadoes and damaging winds, is possible Wednesday. And even the Carolinas and Mid-Atlantic need to be paying attention. I will be back tomorrow morning with updates as new model data comes in and as the National Hurricane Center issues new advisories. Things are moving fast with this one. Remember, 36 hours ago, we weren't even sure this was worth talking about. That tells you everything you need to know about how quickly the tropics can surprise you. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Genuinely. Stay weather aware. Please take the flooding threat seriously this week. God bless all of you. Stay safe, and I'll catch you tomorrow morning.